Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Daniel Thorne had always understood that his life was a series of controlled ascents and descents. At 42, as an international cargo pilot, he commanded a Boeing 777 freighter, a 200-ton machine that he guided across oceans with an unshakable calm. Turbulence was just data. Mechanical warnings were problems to be solved. Emotion was a variable he had long since learned to eliminate from the equation. At 40,000 feet, he believed he applied the same meticulous control to his life on the ground. 15 years earlier, he had met Chloe. It was in a crowded pub near the University of British Columbia. The air thick with the smell of spilled beer and youthful ambition. He was a young pilot then, full of stories about Hong Kong sunrises and navigating thunderstorms over the Pacific. She was Chloe Vance then. 40 years old now, but 25 at the time. Finishing her degree in commerce. She had a way of listening that made him feel too seen. A spark in her eyes when she talked about building a career that mirrored his own passion for the sky. He convinced himself, then, and for years after, that she understood. That she understood the pact he had made with his profession, that half his life would be spent in a different time zone. They married in a small ceremony at Queen Elizabeth Park, with the Vancouver skyline as their witness. The years that followed were efficient. Predictable. They had 3 children. Leo, a quiet and intense 13-year-old, obsessed with ice hockey. Ava, 10, who filled notebooks with intricate drawings of mythical creatures. And 7-year-old Grace, a whirlwind of energy, always choreographing a new dance in the living room. Their life was settled. A comfortable, 2-story house in Kitsilano, close enough to the water to smell the salt in the air on a windy day. Daniel's schedule was a relentless cycle of long-haul flights. He spent roughly 15 days of every month away from home, sleeping in sterile hotel rooms in Shanghai, London, and Dubai. And while he was navigating global air corridors, Chloe managed the complex logistics of their life on the ground. She had built an impressive career of her own, rising to senior logistics manager at a large import-export firm downtown. She ran the household, managed the children's schedules, and kept everything together. Their communication became a series of data points. A quick text message. Leo has a game at 6. Don't forget. A hurried video call from a hotel room, where his children's faces would pixelate on the screen, their voices tinny and distant. He would see Chloe in the background, a perpetual look of exhaustion etched onto her features. He registered it, filed it away under work stress, or the pressures of motherhood. An N? Never considering it might be a symptom of something he couldn't see. He felt the familiar pang of guilt for being so far away. But it was a guilt he had learned to compartmentalize. A necessary sacrifice. The cost of providing the life they had built. He was the provider, the protector flying through the dark to ensure their world remained bright and stable. He never imagined the foundations of that world were silently crumbling beneath his feet. The Tuesday that changed everything began with a routine sensor malfunction. It was nothing catastrophic. Just a secondary hydraulic pressure indicator, throwing an erroneous reading. A nuisance. But company policy was rigid. Any persistent warning, no matter how minor, required an immediate return to base. So, 6 hours into a 14-hour flight to Tokyo, Daniel banked the massive freighter and set a course back to Vancouver. The landing was smooth. The debriefing routine. The maintenance crew informed him it was a simple sensor replacement, but it would ground the plane for at least 48 hours. The airline put him on an unexpected layover. And so he found himself standing outside the Vancouver International Airport at 2 in the afternoon, on a bright, sunny Tuesday. The children would be in school until 3:30. Chloe, he assumed, would be at her downtown office until at least 6. A rare opportunity presented itself. A chance to surprise them. A chance to be the dad who shows up unexpectedly, the husband who walks through the door in the middle of a weekday. He took a taxi directly from the airport. During the 30-minute ride, he sent Chloe a text. How's the day going? He didn't mention he was back. Her reply came a moment later. A tired face emoji. And the words. Long day. Can't wait for it to be over. He interpreted the message through his own lens of fatigue. They were both tired. They were both working hard. The taxi pulled up to the house at 2:15. Daniel paid the driver, grabbed his small rollerboard suitcase, and walked up the familiar stone path. That's when he saw the first anomaly. Chloe's dark gray Subaru Outback, parked in the driveway. A detail that didn't fit the established pattern. Chloe always took the SkyTrain to her downtown office. Driving was a nightmare. Why was her car here? Maybe she was working from home, he reasoned. Though she rarely did on a Tuesday. He unlocked the front door with his key. And stepped inside. Quietly. The house was silent. But it was a heavy, unfamiliar silence. He set his suitcase down in the entryway. And then he saw it. Draped carelessly over the newel post at the bottom of the staircase. A man's leather jacket. It wasn't his. It was a sleek, expensive-looking moto jacket. The kind of thing worn by men who spent too much on their hair. His heart, usually a steady and reliable instrument, began to beat with a frantic, unfamiliar rhythm. He started up the stairs. Slowly. Each step creaking under his weight. Like a warning. As he reached the top of the hallway, he heard it. Voices. They were coming from the master bedroom. Chloe's voice. Low and intimate. Punctuated by a sound that made his blood run cold. A man's soft, confident laugh. He felt a strange detachment. The same calm he felt when an alarm blared in the cockpit. He was an observer. Processing data. He moved toward the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, he saw a tangle of limbs. On his bed. He didn't hesitate. He shoved the door open. The two figures on the bed jerked apart. Their faces, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Daniel recognized the man instantly. Markham Hayes. Chloe's director of operations. A man with dark hair always combed back just so, who wore expensive shirts and spoke a little too loudly at corporate holiday parties. Daniel had always found him arrogant. And now, this arrogant man was in his bed. With his wife. In the house Daniel paid for. Chloe screamed his name, a desperate, strangled sound as she fumbled to pull the sheet over herself. Markham Hayes scrambled off the bed, tripping over his own trousers in a pathetic display of panicked haste. For a moment, there was only chaos. Chloe stammering, Markham muttering apologies, lost in the thick, charged air. But Daniel didn't yell. He didn't curse. The fury inside him was a white-hot, silent thing. He looked at them both, one after the other, with a contempt so pure it felt like ice. In a low, cutting voice that carried more menace than any shout ever could, he said, "Get out of my house." He paused, his eyes locked on Markham. Now. Markham, dressing with record speed, didn't make eye contact. He snatched the leather jacket from the hallway and practically fell down the stairs. The front door slammed shut. The sound echoing through the silent house. Chloe tried to approach him then. Her hand outstretched. Her eyes filled with tears. "We can talk," she pleaded. I can explain." But Daniel was already moving. He walked past her as if she were a ghost, went downstairs, picked up his suitcase, and walked out the front door without another word. He heard her run after him, her begging voice following him down the street. But he was already pulling out his phone, ordering another taxi. The hotel room near the airport was sterile and anonymous. A perfect reflection of the hollowed-out feeling inside him. He sat on the edge of the bed for hours, staring at his phone as it buzzed relentlessly with calls and texts from Chloe. He didn't answer. Answering would be an emotional act, and emotion was a liability. This was a crisis. And in a crisis, he didn't feel. He executed a checklist. His first action was to open his laptop and type 3 words into the search bar. Divorce lawyer Vancouver. He scrolled through the results, looking for the best reviewed firms. The ones with professional websites and testimonials that spoke of efficiency and favorable outcomes. He found a firm with a partner named Evelyn Reed. A woman with 20 years of experience in family law. He left a concise message on her firm's contact form, requesting an urgent consultation. Then, he did something else. Some might have called it an act of revenge. Born of rage. But Daniel, in his cold, calculated state, framed it as a necessary, professional step. He looked up the general contact number for Chloe's company, navigated the automated menu, and asked to be put through to the Human Resources Department. He kept his tone perfectly level. The same calm, authoritative voice he used to speak to air traffic control. He explained that he needed to report a situation that he believed was a serious violation of their company's conflict of interest policy. He stated his name, and his relationship to Chloe Thorne, the senior logistics manager. He then reported that he had discovered a personal, intimate relationship between her and her direct superior, the director of operations, Markham Hayes. He gave the date and the time. He offered no salacious details. Only the facts. He knew large corporations were terrified of lawsuits. A relationship between a manager and a subordinate was a litigious minefield. He was simply informing them of a liability. It was, he told himself, the responsible thing to do. The next morning, Daniel sat across a polished mahogany desk from Evelyn Reed. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened intently, her pen scratching across a legal pad as he recounted the events. She asked direct questions. About timelines, finances, the children's routines. Under British Columbia law, she explained, her voice clear and precise, this is a no-fault jurisdiction. The adultery itself won't drastically alter the division of assets. She paused, looking at him over the top of her glasses. But it can significantly influence decisions around the guardianship of the children. Especially if it can be demonstrated that the behavior created an unstable environment, or negatively impacted their well-being. That was the key. The children. He had to protect the children. Do you have documented proof? She asked. I saw it with my own eyes, Daniel said. And I imagine there's more. They work together. They must communicate. Evelyn Reed nodded slowly. During the discovery process, we can request all of her communications, phone records, emails, especially anything sent through her corporate accounts. Those are company property. A cold sense of certainty settled over Daniel. He had not just acted on impulse. He had acted correctly. He signed the initial retainer paperwork, setting in motion the legal machinery that would dismantle his 15-year marriage. He was no longer just a husband. He was a plaintiff. The call Daniel had made to HR acted like a catalyst. The company, a massive, publicly traded entity, moved with brutal efficiency. An internal investigation was launched immediately. And as Evelyn Reed had predicted, the corporate email servers were the treasure trove. The compliance team discovered hundreds of emails. They were a violation of every acceptable use policy the company had. Daniel learned about their contents later, through his lawyer's reports, which he read with a detached, clinical interest. The emails were intimate, filled with plans for clandestine meetings during work hours. They mentioned using empty boardrooms for private moments. They detailed a planned weekend trip to Whistler, disguised as a work conference, that never happened only because Daniel had returned from a trip a day earlier than expected. And there were messages where Chloe wrote about feeling alive with Markham. About feeling neglected by Daniel's constant travel. He read those lines not with a pang of guilt, but with a surge of righteous anger. She was using his sacrifice as her excuse, twisting his hard work into a justification for her betrayal. The company had no choice. Markham Hayes was terminated immediately. His dismissal was processed in less than a week. For Chloe, with her 15 years of service, the process was slightly different, but no less severe. She was suspended without pay for 30 days. When she was finally allowed to return, it was not as a manager. She was formally demoted to a senior analyst position, her title stripped, her responsibilities curtailed. The demotion came with a salary reduction of nearly 40%. Her professional reputation, built over a decade and a half, was destroyed. The divorce proceedings moved forward with similar speed. Evelyn Reed and her team were relentless. They gathered financial records, subpoenaed phone logs, and, with a court order, gained access to the corporate emails that had sealed Chloe's professional fate. The evidence was overwhelming. During custody negotiations, Chloe's lawyer argued that Daniel's career made him an absentee father, that she should have primary custody. But Evelyn Reed dismantled that argument. Piece by piece. She presented the emails where Chloe confessed to Markham that she was glad Daniel was flying, because it gave them more time together. She showed how Chloe had actively used his work trips as an opportunity to facilitate the affair. Daniel, in turn, presented his own evidence. Flight manifests cross-referenced with call logs, showing he never missed a call to the children before their bedtime, no matter what time zone he was in. Emails to their teachers. Records of him helping Leo with his homework via video chat from a hotel in Germany. He had an impeccable, documented record of emotional involvement. The judge, a stern-faced woman who reviewed the evidence in silence, was clearly swayed. The ruling was clear. Daniel would have primary custody of all 3 children. Chloe was entitled to visits on alternating weekends, and for a few weeks during school holidays. The Kitsilano house, their home for over a decade, was to be sold. The proceeds split equally. Daniel would use his share to buy a smaller home in a nearby neighborhood, ensuring the children wouldn't have to change schools. Chloe, with her drastically reduced salary and mounting legal fees, was forced to move into a 2-bedroom apartment in a less affluent part of the city. As for Markham Hayes, he vanished. Daniel heard later that he had left Vancouver entirely, taken a lower-paying job in Edmonton. He had blocked Chloe on all social media, and never responded to her messages. For him, the affair had been a matter of convenience. Now that it had cost him his career, he wanted nothing more to do with the woman at the center of it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, a new rhythm had settled into Daniel's life. He had successfully bid for a new flight schedule, shifting to domestic cargo routes, shorter trips. More nights at home. The children were adjusting. But a shadow remained. Chloe had been telling her own version of the story. In her telling, she was a victim. A victim of a lonely, emotionally barren marriage. Daniel was an absent husband. Always gone. Always distant. The affair was not a choice, she implied, but an inevitable consequence. This narrative, this distortion of the truth, was something Daniel could not tolerate. The truth mattered. As a pilot, he lived by it. Data, facts, checklists. He decided he needed to apply the same principle to his family. He organized a family meeting. It was an unprecedented event. He invited everyone. His parents, Chloe's parents, his brother, and Chloe's sister. He even invited Chloe, sending her a formal, dispassionate email. The purpose of the meeting was to clear up any misunderstandings, to ensure everyone had a clear and accurate understanding of the events. Hoping, perhaps, for reconciliation. She accepted. The meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon, in the living room of Daniel's new house. The children were at a neighbor's. The room was thick with tension. Chloe was the last to arrive. She looked thin and worn. She sat slightly apart from the main group. Daniel began to speak. His voice was calm and firm. The same tone he used for in-flight announcements during turbulence. Conveying authority and absolute control. He thanked them for coming. Explained that he felt there was too much misinformation circulating. And as the father of 3 children who would one day ask questions, he wanted to ensure the truth was documented and clear. Chloe went pale. She understood now. This was not about healing. He opened a leather folder on the coffee table. Inside were neatly organized documents. Copies of emails, HR reports, legal filings. He started with the timeline. Describing his unexpected return home. He recounted. With unnerving calm, finding another man's jacket, hearing the voices, and seeing the scene in the bedroom. He named Markham Hayes. Chloe's parents. A quiet, respectable couple, visibly crumbled. Her mother covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Her father's face turned a dark, mottled red, his hands clenched into fists. Daniel continued. His voice never wavering. He explained that he had reported the relationship to the company. Not out of revenge, he said, but because their actions had violated corporate policy. He then presented the emails. A few key examples. The messages where Chloe celebrated his work trips. The messages planning their trysts in company boardrooms. The messages where she confessed she felt alive again, with Markham. The room was utterly silent. broken only by the sound of Chloe's mother weeping softly. Chloe's sister, who had been holding her hand, let go and shifted away slightly. He moved on to the professional consequences. Then he addressed the custody ruling, reading excerpts from the judge's decision which cited Chloe's deception. He pointed out how her own emails had been used to disprove her claim that he was an absent father. Chloe tried to speak, her voice a weak, trembling whisper. "It was a mistake. I was so sorry." Daniel held up a hand, cutting her off. He wasn't finished. He looked directly at her parents. "I know Chloe told you. Our marriage ended because I was always gone," he said, his voice laced with a cold, hard finality. "But the truth is, she made a conscious choice to betray 15 years of trust. She chose to put her own desires above the well-being of our 3 children. And I will not allow that distorted version of the facts to become our family's history. Not when my children will one day want to know what really happened." He laid out the final documents. A photo of the leather jacket. A copy of Markham's termination letter. The documentation was meticulous, irrefutable. Chloe's father stood up abruptly and walked out of the room without a word. Her mother sobbed into her hands. Daniel closed the folder. "I didn't do this to humiliate anyone," he said, and perhaps, in his own mind, he believed it. "I did it because the truth matters. Because Leo, Ava, and Grace deserve to grow up knowing their father fought for them. And because all of you deserve to know what really happened." Chloe stood up, tears streaming down her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She grabbed her purse and fled the house, the front door slamming shut behind her. In the heavy silence that followed, the balance of power in the room had irrevocably shifted. Chloe's father returned a few minutes later, his eyes red, and extended a hand to Daniel. He gripped it tightly. A silent concession. A transfer of allegiance. The meeting ended soon after. When they were all gone, Daniel sat alone in his living room, watching the sun set. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel satisfaction. He felt only a deep, weary relief. The kind a pilot feels after navigating a perilous storm, and landing safely on the other side. He had done what needed to be done. He had protected his narrative. He had created a documented record, an official history. That night, when Leo, Ava, and Grace came home, he made their favorite dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs. They were bubbly and excited, blissfully unaware of the family court-martial that had taken place in their living room. As he watched his 3 children laughing around the table, a sense of peace settled over him, a peace he hadn't felt in months. He had lost a wife, but he had kept his children. He had kept his dignity. In the weeks that followed, the new reality solidified. Chloe tried to call family members, but the conversations were short and cold. Her parents visited Daniel a few times a week to see their grandchildren. They never mentioned their daughter's name in his presence. He heard that Markham Hayes had gotten married. Chloe continued to work at the same company, a ghost in the hallways of her former career. She saw the children on her designated weekends. But the visits were strained. Daniel found a new routine that worked. He flew his domestic routes. He never missed a hockey game, an art show, or a dance recital. He was present. He was stable. He was, by all accounts, the perfect father. Every night before bed, he would look at the framed photo on his nightstand. A recent picture of the 3 kids laughing in the park, their faces bright and carefree. He knew he had made the right choices. Truth, he had discovered, was a powerful weapon. It had come at a price. But it was worth it. The silence that had filled the living room that day wasn't a silence of defeat. It was the silence of truth finally established, of order restored. It was the silence of a man who had faced the most painful betrayal, and emerged not as a victim, but as the sole author of the story that remained. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.